The chill isn't from the open window. It's the cold wash of the screen in my hand. My thumb traces the numbers, or the lack of them.
0.
A single, stark, defiant 0 where there should be 6 digits, maybe 7 on a good week. The joint account. Our account. The one we built, penny by excruciating penny, through years that felt like decades, pooling every spare cent, every unexpected bonus, every tax refund, believing in a future we were forging together. Now just 0. A void. It stares back at me, colder than any winter I've ever known, and something inside me fractures. The air leaves my lungs in a rush, silent and desperate, and the room spins, not like I'm drunk, but like the very foundations of my reality are crumbling, the walls leaning in, the floor tilting. My hand trembles, the phone feeling suddenly heavy, foreign.
0. How? Why?
The questions hammer against my skull, each one a tiny, sharp shard of ice. The silence in the apartment is suddenly deafening, amplifying the frantic drumbeat in my chest.
0.
If this story hits a nerve, if you've ever felt the ground disappear beneath your feet, tell me about it in the comments. I read all of them. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me keep sharing these stories, more than you know. Before the 0, there was the rhythm. There was the shared morning coffee ritual, the clink of ceramic mugs, the specific way he liked his toast. There was the hum of the office downstairs, the business we built, brick by painstaking brick, fueled by late nights and cheap takeout, and a belief in something bigger than ourselves. We called it ours, even though I was often the quiet force in the background, managing the logistics, the finances, the endless, mind-numbing details that kept the machine running while he was the face, the visionary, the one who schmoozed clients and closed deals. It was a partnership, defined by an unspoken division of labor. He brought the fire, I brought the water. He was the sail, I was the anchor. It worked. It felt solid. We bought this apartment above the office, blurring the lines between work and life until they ceased to exist, our world contained within these 4 walls and the floor below. The joint account was the financial heart of that world. It held our savings, our emergency fund, the money earmarked for the future we constantly talked about, a small cabin upstate, a trip to Italy, a cushion for retirement. It represented security, years of sacrifice condensed into a digital number. We trusted each other implicitly with it. There were no secrets, no individual stashes, just this shared pool, a symbol of our intertwined lives, our shared destiny. We were a unit, indivisible. The foundation felt unbreakable, built on years of shared struggle and hard-won success. He was my partner, my best friend, the person I shared everything with. Every fear, every hope, every mundane detail of the day. The idea that he could deliberately hurt me, that he could dismantle something we built together, was a foreign concept, an impossibility that simply did not exist in the universe I inhabited. The days were long, filled with the predictable ebb and flow of running a business, but they were ours. The evenings were quiet, sometimes spent going over plans, sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. There was a peace in that predictability, a comfort in the routine. It wasn't always exciting, but it was ours, a life woven together thread by thread, strong and resilient. The joint account was just one thread, but it was a thick one, reinforcing the entire fabric. It felt like a promise, a silent vow that we were in this together, come what may. We talked about our financial goals, our dreams, our fears about the future, all centered around this shared pool of resources. It wasn't just money. It was potential, it was security, it was the tangible representation of our collective effort. We debated purchases, celebrated milestones that increased the balance, commiserated when unexpected expenses chipped away at it. It was a living thing, a reflection of our joint journey. The trust was absolute, unwavering. It was the bedrock of everything. I handled most of the day-to-day finances, paid the bills, tracked the spending, but he always had access, always knew the balance. There was never a lock on the door, never a need for one. The concept of one of us taking the money and leaving was so outlandish, so contrary to the very nature of our relationship, it had never even crossed my mind as a remote possibility. It was the furthest thing from my thoughts, residing in a realm of hypothetical nightmares that felt utterly disconnected from my waking life. We were a team, bound by shared ambition and deep affection. The business thrived because of our combined efforts, his outward charm and my inward discipline. The money in that account was the fruit of that labor, shared equally, managed jointly. Or so I believed. The comfort of that belief was a warm blanket, shielding me from the harsh possibilities that existed in the world outside our carefully constructed bubble. I felt safe, secure, loved. The future seemed bright, predictable, ours. The zero shattered all of it. The first hint wasn't a grand revelation, but a tiny snag, an almost imperceptible pull on that tightly woven thread. I tried to pay the weekly grocery bill, a routine transaction I'd done 100 times, and the card declined. A small wave of confusion, then irritation. Glitch in the system, maybe? I tried again. Declined. I felt a flicker of unease, a tiny pinprick of worry. I checked the balance on the store's app. It should have been more than enough. That's when I opened the bank's own app, the one I'd just looked at yesterday, the one I trusted implicitly. My fingers navigated the familiar interface, muscle memory guiding me to the joint account details. And then I saw it. The zero. The single, solitary digit that vaporized my security, my trust, my entire understanding of my reality. The world tilted. My breath hitched. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird.
0.
It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a mistake. The numbers didn't lie. Every single dollar, every cent we had painstakingly saved, was gone. Vanished. The transaction history showed a single, massive outgoing transfer, dated yesterday. The recipient? An account I didn't recognize, an account in a different name. Not ours. Not mine. His name wasn't explicitly there, not on the recipient line, but the sheer size, the timing, the utter devastation it wrought could only point to one person. It was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole my breath and left me reeling. The blood drained from my face, leaving me lightheaded, faint. I gripped the counter, my knuckles white, trying to stay upright as the room swam. This wasn't just about the money. This was about the betrayal, the calculated cruelty of taking everything, leaving me with nothing. It was a declaration, stark and brutal. He hadn't just left. He had scorched the earth behind him. The zero wasn't just a number. It was the negation of our past, the obliteration of our present, and the terrifying void where our future should have been. My mind scrambled, trying to find a logical explanation, a misunderstanding, anything other than the cold, hard truth staring back at me from the screen. But there was nothing. The transfer was real. The account was empty. And the person who had done it was the person I trusted more than anyone in the world. The silence in the apartment pressed in on me, heavy and suffocating. The mundane sounds of the street outside, a car horn, distant voices, felt alien, unreal. My world had just shrunk to the size of this phone screen, this single, devastating number. The knot in my stomach tightened, a cold, hard mass of fear and disbelief. He wouldn't. He couldn't. But the zero was undeniable proof that he had. Panic was a physical sensation, a tightening in my chest, a frantic energy that propelled me into action, even as my mind reeled. I tried calling him. His phone went straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again and again, each unanswered call a tiny hammer blow against the fragile shell of my remaining hope. I sent texts. A flood of questions, desperate pleas for explanation, for understanding. Read receipts remained stubbornly gray. No response. The silence from his end was deafening, confirming the worst. He wasn't unavailable, he was gone. And he had taken everything. The immediate fallout was a cascade of small, terrifying failures. Bills bounced. Subscriptions failed. The credit card linked to the joint account was declined. Each failure was a fresh sting, a reminder of how utterly dependent our shared life had been on that single financial artery. I had no personal savings, no secret stash. Every dollar was tied up in us now. Us was a cruel joke, and I was left with nothing. Food in the fridge would run out. Rent was due soon. How would I even buy a bus ticket? The practical realities of being financially wiped out crashed down on me, overwhelming the initial shock of betrayal. Beyond the personal horror, there was the business. Our business. What did this mean for its finances? For the employees? For the clients? My mind raced, trying to compartmentalize, to think logically, but the emotional tidal wave kept pulling me under.
I felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare.
Humiliation mixed with the fear. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted so completely? Every memory of our shared life suddenly felt tainted, seen through a new, horrifying lens. Was it all a lie? Was this the plan all along? The questions were relentless, circling like vultures. I called a lawyer, my voice trembling as I tried to explain, the words catching in my throat. The lawyer was polite, professional, but distant.
It sounded complicated, she said.
Proving intent, tracing funds, the legal process was slow, expensive, and offered no guarantees. Her words, though measured, felt like another blow. The system wasn't designed for immediate justice, for raw, emotional betrayal. It was designed for process, for evidence, for time. Time I didn't have. Money I didn't have. The initial burst of frantic energy drained away, leaving me with a profound, heavy weariness. The apartment felt cold, empty, haunted by the ghost of the life that had existed just hours before. Every object, every shared photo, was a painful reminder. The future felt like a vast, dark ocean I was being pushed into, without a boat, without a paddle, without even a life vest. Just me and the crushing weight of nothing. The days that followed blurred into a haze of anxiety and frantic damage control. The business was a mess. Without access to the joint account, essential operating expenses couldn't be paid. Suppliers called, their voices polite at first, then increasingly urgent, then sharp with suspicion. Employees looked at me with worried eyes, whispers following me through the office. I tried to explain, to reassure, but the words felt hollow, even to me. How could I promise them stability when my own world had imploded? The main business account, the one used for payroll, major expenses, and receiving client payments, was a separate entity, but its operations were intertwined with the joint account for certain transfers, for my own salary, for his draw. My access to that main business account was limited to administrative tasks, processing payments, viewing statements. I couldn't initiate large transfers out, couldn't touch the principal, but I could see everything. And what I saw was a slow, agonizing bleed. Money going out, nothing coming in from the joint account to cover overheads or unexpected costs. He, wherever he was, still had access to certain business funds, using them for unknown purposes, while the core operational account, the one responsible for keeping the lights on and people paid, was slowly suffocating without the regular injections it needed. The pressure mounted daily. Legal letters started arriving, not from me, but from creditors. The landlord for the office space called, demanding payment. The bank froze some of the business credit cards due to insufficient funds in linked accounts. Each call, each letter, each failed transaction was another twist of the knife. I felt like I was standing in the path of an avalanche, trying to build a wall with my bare hands. Sleep was impossible. Nights spent staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, searching for clues I'd missed, signs I'd ignored. Every memory of his affection, his promises, his trust, felt like a lie, a performance designed to keep me compliant, to keep me blind. The humiliation was a constant, low thrum beneath my skin. How could someone I knew so intimately, someone I shared a bed with, a life with, be capable of such cold, calculated cruelty? It wasn't just theft. It was an annihilation of a shared history. Friends offered sympathy, but their eyes held a mixture of pity and judgment. Some whispered about how I should have seen it coming, how I was naive. Their well-meaning advice felt like sandpaper on an open wound. I was alone, facing the wreckage of my life and our business, armed with nothing but the knowledge that the person who swore to protect me had been the one to destroy me. The future wasn't just dark anymore. It was a terrifying unknown, a precipice I was being pushed towards with increasing speed. All my efforts to keep the business afloat felt futile, like bailing out a sinking ship with a teacup while the person who sank it watched from a lifeboat. Amidst the crushing weight of the crisis, huddled on the floor surrounded by crumpled bank statements and legal forms, a tiny, almost forgotten detail surfaced. It wasn't a sudden flash of inspiration, but a slow, persistent nagging at the back of my mind. I was looking at the initial setup documents for the main business account, the one he primarily used for income and major expenditures. My eyes scanned the fine print, the lists of authorized users, the clauses about account management. Most of it was administrative jargon I'd processed years ago without much thought, filing it away after ensuring everything was compliant.
But then I saw it.
A specific clause. Something about requiring both founding partners' signatures, or perhaps my initial as the signatory administrator for certain types of access or changes, specifically regarding large transfers or account holds. It had been a minor detail at the time, put in place as a safeguard, a standard business practice recommended by the bank's compliance officer. He had dismissed it as bureaucracy, another hoop to jump through, but I, ever the diligent administrator, had insisted we follow all protocols, dotting every I and crossing every T. I remembered the day we signed the papers, sitting in the bank office, the air thick with forced politeness. He had been impatient, eager to get to the real work, while I meticulously reviewed each page. That detail, the one requiring my involvement for certain critical actions, suddenly took on monumental significance. It wasn't just about viewing statements, it was about control. Limited control, yes, not the power to drain it, but perhaps the power to pause it, to freeze it. The thought sent a jolt through me. It was a long shot, a technicality buried in paperwork he likely hadn't looked at since the day he signed it, if he had even read it then. He trusted me to handle the details, to manage the paperwork. He wouldn't have remembered that specific clause, wouldn't have factored it into his plan. His plan was simple: take the joint money, disappear, leave me to deal with the mess, confident that he still had access to the main business account to start his new life, perhaps even intending to slowly drain that one too once the dust settled. He saw me as the administrator, the detail person, not a threat. He saw me as someone who would break under pressure, who would be too timid, too distraught to fight back effectively. That assumption, that fundamental misjudgment of my character and my role, was his blind spot. And in that blind spot lay my potential leverage. The shift wasn't just strategic, it was deeply emotional. The despair didn't vanish, but it was joined, then slowly overshadowed, by a cold, hard resolve. The victimhood I had felt, the helplessness, began to recede, replaced by a steely determination. I wasn't just the person he betrayed. I was also the person who understood the intricate, boring, crucial machinery of the business better than he did. I was the one who had ensured the safeguards were in place, the one who had built the cage he was now trapped in, even if he didn't know it yet. The focus shifted from the money he took to the control I might still exert over the money he needed. The path forward was suddenly clear, albeit terrifying. It was a dangerous game, playing with the very heart of the business, but the alternative was annihilation. This felt like my one chance, born not out of aggression, but out of the very diligence and attention to detail he had always taken for granted. Even with the glimmer of a plan, the pressure didn't relent. In fact, it intensified. A formal letter arrived from his lawyer, cold and clinical, outlining his demands, offering a pittance as a settlement, framing me as the problem, claiming I was mismanaging the business in his absence. It was a calculated attack, designed to strip me of any remaining dignity and leverage. He was making the first move, trying to establish a narrative where he was the wronged party, forced to take his money and leave a failing venture. It felt like a punch after I was already down. The employees grew more anxious, some openly asking if they should look for other jobs. A major client, spooked by the rumors and the disruption, hinted they might take their business elsewhere. The walls were closing in. My own lawyer, while acknowledging the potential leverage of the business account clause, warned me of the risks. Freezing a business account wasn't a simple act. It had wide-ranging consequences, potentially crippling the very entity I was trying to protect, albeit from him. There would be legal battles, accusations, further destruction. Doubt gnawed at me. Was I strong enough for this fight? Was this piece of paper, this obscure clause, truly the weapon I hoped it was, or just a technicality that would lead to more legal quicksand? He seemed so confident in his moves, so assured of his victory. His lawyer's letter dripped with that confidence. He had the money, he had disappeared, he was trying to control the narrative. It felt like he was orchestrating this from afar, pulling strings, watching me struggle. There were moments, late at night, when the despair would return with crushing force. The zero in the joint account felt like a brand on my soul. The emptiness wasn't just financial, it was an emotional chasm. How could I face the world, rebuild a life, when the very foundation had been so cruelly demolished by the person who was supposed to be my partner? The fear of failure, the fear of being utterly ruined, was palpable. It wasn't just about recovering money anymore, it was about survival. It was about proving to myself, and to him, that I wasn't just the administrator, the quiet partner, the one left behind. It was about finding a strength I hadn't known I possessed, buried beneath years of comfortable routine and shared life. The crisis deepened, pushing me closer and closer to the edge. The air felt thin, the pressure immense. It was a test, not just of my financial acumen, but of my will, my resilience, my fundamental ability to endure and fight back when everything seemed lost. The fear was real, a cold knot in my stomach, but beneath it, a flicker of something else began to grow, a hard, bright ember of pure, unadulterated resolve. The decision solidified not in a moment of fiery rage, but in a quiet, chilling calm. It was a Tuesday morning, the silence in the apartment pressing down, the air thick with unspoken dread. I held the phone, the number for the bank's corporate services line on the screen. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about survival. It was about stopping the bleeding, disrupting his plan, creating a leverage point where none existed before. I had gone over the documents countless times, spoken to my lawyer, weighed the risks. Freezing the main business account was a nuclear option. It would halt payroll, block incoming payments, potentially alienate clients further, cause chaos. But it would also stop him. It would sever his access to the funds he was likely using, the funds he needed to fund his disappearance and his next move. More importantly, it would force him out of the shadows. He couldn't operate the business, couldn't access its capital, if the account was frozen.
He would have to react.
He would have to contact me. He would have to confront the situation on my terms, not his. My finger hovered over the call button. The knot in my stomach was tight, but the frantic panic had been replaced by a cold, hard determination. There was no turning back from this. It was a line in the sand. I wasn't just the person he stole from. I was the guardian of the business we built, the one left to pick up the pieces. This wasn't a whim, it was a calculated necessity. My breathing was shallow, but steady. The silence in the apartment felt different now, not empty, but charged with anticipation. This was the moment. The culmination of weeks of fear, despair, and quiet planning. I wasn't the anchor anymore. I was the torpedo. I wasn't the water to his fire. I was the ice, capable of freezing everything in its path. I pressed the call button. The phone rang, each ring a hammer blow against the silence. A professional voice answered, calm, neutral. I stated my name, my role, the business name. I explained, in precise, measured terms, citing the specific clause in the account agreement, the reasons for my request, suspected fraudulent activity, unauthorized use of funds, risk to the business operations. I provided the documentation, the proof of my authority as signatory administrator for this specific action. The representative listened, asked questions, verified the information. The process was clinical, bureaucratic, a stark contrast to the emotional maelstrom inside me. But in that very clinicality there was strength. The power of process, of rules, of documented agreements. It wasn't personal, it was procedural. I followed the steps, completed the forms, sent the necessary faxes and emails. It took time, explaining everything, reiterating the clause, waiting for internal verification. Each minute felt like an hour. Finally, the representative confirmed receipt of the request. The account will be placed on immediate hold pending a full investigation, she said. The words were simple, but their weight was immense. Immediate hold. Frozen. A wave of something complex washed over me. Not triumph, not relief, but a deep, bone-weary certainty. The trap was sprung. The silence that followed the call felt different again. It wasn't anticipation now. It was the heavy quiet after a decisive blow has landed. He didn't know it yet, but his escape route had just been cut off. His carefully constructed plan was about to hit a wall, built not of emotion or accusation, but of bank regulations and contractual agreements. The phone rang late that afternoon. I saw his name on the caller ID, and my breath caught. I hadn't heard from him directly since he vanished. Silence had been his weapon. Now he was breaking it. I let it ring, watching his name flash on the screen. A digital ghost from a life that felt impossibly distant. It stopped. Moments later, a text arrived. Short, arrogant.
Need to talk.
Pick up, I didn't reply. He tried calling again. This time, it didn't go to voicemail. He was persistent. I waited through several rings, my hand trembling slightly as I finally accepted the call. His voice, when he spoke, was strained, laced with an irritation he usually reserved for incompetent staff. What the hell is going on? He demanded, not a greeting, just an accusation. My card was declined. Every card is declined. I can't access the account, he paused, expecting an answer, expecting perhaps me to be in hysterics, begging him to come back, to fix it. I took a slow breath, the air feeling impossibly cold in my lungs. My voice, when it came out, was quiet, steady, stripped of any emotion. The main business account, I said, each word deliberate, precise, has been frozen, a beat of silence on his end. He wasn't expecting that. Not from me. Frozen, he repeated, the irritation replaced by something else, a flicker of confusion, then dawning panic. What do you mean, frozen? By who? By the bank, I replied, still quiet. Following my instructions, the silence on his end this time was longer, deeper. I could almost hear his mind racing, scrambling. He had factored in the joint account being emptied. He hadn't factored in the business account being inaccessible. Your instructions? He finally sputtered, the panic evident now, cracking his facade. You can't do that. You don't have that authority. Actually, I said, my voice still calm. A stark contrast to his escalating agitation. The account agreement, Section 7, Subsection B, grants signatory administrators the authority to request a hold pending investigation into suspected financial irregularities. As you know, I set up that account. I made sure all the proper documentation was in place. I could practically hear the blood drain from his face. He had dismissed my role, my attention to detail, seeing it as mere administrative work. He had forgotten the safeguards I had insisted upon, the boring paperwork he hadn't bothered to read. His silence stretched, potent with shock and disbelief. He had planned for my emotional collapse, not my strategic countermove. He had anticipated tears, not a calculated, procedural strike. You can't leave me stranded, he finally burst out, the mask of control completely gone, revealing the desperate fear beneath. I need that money. What about payroll? What about the clients? You're going to ruin everything. The irony was breathtaking. He had ruined everything first, and now he was accusing me. You should have thought about that, I said, my voice losing a fraction of its calmness, a flicker of the cold satisfaction finally breaking through. Before you emptied our joint account. Before you stole everything we built together, his attempts at bluster and intimidation crumbled. He tried pleading, then threatening, his voice cycling through panic and rage. But his words bounced off me. I had built a wall, solid and impenetrable, made of betrayal and cold resolve. He was trapped. The money he had taken from the joint account was a finite sum, burning down while his source of replenishing it, the main business account, was now inaccessible. His elaborate plan, his arrogant getaway, had just hit a dead end, not because of a legal battle he could drag out, but because of a bank hold he couldn't bypass. He was blindsided. He had underestimated me, the quiet administrator, the woman he had left with nothing. And in doing so, he had given me the only weapon I had. I listened to his increasingly frantic demands, his hollow threats, his desperate pleas, and felt nothing but a chilling sense of equilibrium. The zero in my account was still there, a raw wound, but now the vast sums in his essential account were also zeros, frozen, inaccessible. He had taken my financial security. I had taken his operational lifeline. The climax wasn't a shouting match or a physical confrontation. It was this phone call, this quiet assertion of procedural power, watching his world collapse on the other end of the line, built on a foundation he never bothered to understand. Finally, when he ran out of threats and pleas, when his voice broke, I hung up. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. It felt still. The storm wasn't over, not by a long shot, but the eye had passed directly over me. The quiet after I hung up the phone was profound. It wasn't the silence of emptiness, but the silence of a battlefield after the final shot has been fired. He didn't call back. He didn't text. The flurry of communication ceased abruptly, replaced by a heavy, weighted stillness. The shock of the frozen account had evidently been total. The immediate aftermath was a complex mix of exhaustion, grim satisfaction, and lingering pain. The business was in limbo, the main account inaccessible. There were frantic calls from employees, confused queries from clients. My lawyer immediately began negotiations, using the frozen account as leverage. The process was slow, tense, and emotionally draining. We fought for every dollar, every asset, every piece of the life he had tried to steal. The zero in the joint account remained a stark reminder of the betrayal, a scar that might never fully heal. But now, it wasn't a symbol of my destitution, but a testament to the depth of the wound he inflicted, a wound that forced me to find a strength I never knew I had. The business eventually stabilized, albeit irrevocably changed. The legal battle over the frozen funds and the dissolved partnership dragged on, a tedious, draining epilogue to the dramatic confrontation. But the power dynamic had shifted. He was no longer in control, dictating terms from afar. He was reacting, scrambling, trying to salvage something from a plan that had backfired spectacularly. He had underestimated the quiet partner, the one who paid attention to the details, the one who built the administrative framework he took for granted. The victory, if you could call it that, was bittersweet. I recovered some of the funds, enough to start rebuilding, to keep the business afloat in a new form, scaled down, scarred, but alive. The financial loss was significant, a cost measured not just in dollars, but in years of shared sacrifice and shattered trust. The emotional toll was immense. The man I loved and trusted had revealed himself to be a stranger, capable of calculated cruelty. That knowledge left a permanent chill, a wariness that settled deep in my bones. I learned that the quiet details, the boring paperwork, the administrative safeguards, could be more powerful than grand visions and charming facades. I learned that betrayal leaves a mark, but it doesn't have to be a death sentence. It can be a catalyst, a harsh teacher that forces you to confront your own resilience. The zero in the account is still there, a phantom number I see sometimes when I close my eyes. But now it's just a memory, a marker of where I was, not where I am. I am standing on solid ground again, albeit ground that feels a little less firm than it used to. I built something new from the wreckage, not alone, but with a profound understanding of my own capabilities. The trust one lost is irreplaceable, a void that remains. But in its place, a fierce, quiet independence has grown, a certainty that I can handle whatever comes next, armed with my own strength and a renewed respect for the power of the details. The future isn't a shared dream anymore. It's an open road, uncertain but mine alone to navigate. If you've ever had to fight your way back from a place you never expected to be, if you understand the quiet power found in the aftermath, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life.